Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled How a Digital Strategy Promotes Safety Culture, co-hosted by Deloitte, Microsoft, and IsoMetrix. In terms of the agenda, we're going to get started pretty much straight away. The agenda will begin with a presentation from Anup Mistry from Deloitte about intelligent mining and an integrated approach to safety management, followed by Steve du Preez from Microsoft talking about technology and safety culture, and then finally concluded with Tefo Molosiwa from Debswana presenting some lessons learned in a case study in safety, technology, and people. We'll finish up with a Q&A session, and again, you can use the Q&A board throughout the webinar to post your questions. My name is John Kastner. I'm the CEO and president of IsoMetrix in the Americas. I've got about 15 years of experience working with customers across the globe in many, many industries, helping them implement environmental health and safety, risk and compliance management software. A little bit about IsoMetrix. IsoMetrix is one of the world's leading providers of integrated risk and compliance management software. We tend to focus on 5 main risk disciplines: health, safety, environment, quality, and social. So there's a myriad of acronyms that represent the different businesses and the different solutions that we provide. We've got offices in Australia, Canada, South Africa, the United Kingdom, and the United States, and implementation partners on 4 continents to provide services to organizations at both a global and local level. But today is not about me and it's not about IsoMetrix. It is really about the 3 gentlemen that you see on the screen here who are going to share some really, really interesting and valuable insights based upon their experience. So first, Anup Mistry, Senior Manager Business and Intelligent Operations at Deloitte, will kick us off, again, to give us a great overview about what Deloitte is doing from an intelligent mining perspective. Steve du Preez, an industry executive with Microsoft, and he's going to share much information about what Microsoft is doing these days, and also some great lessons learned in terms of how companies are leveraging technology in response to COVID-19. And then Tefo Molosiwa is the head of safety and sustainability at Debswana. And again, he'll be sharing some great practical case studies on how Debswana is leveraging technology to manage risks and critical controls. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Anup, to go ahead and get started.
And thank you to the audience as well for dialing into today's session. So what I'm going to do today is really share a bit of context around our Deloitte consulting business. What are we doing in the digital space? Secondly, a view on specific trends that we're seeing in the industry, particularly now under the COVID-19 circumstances and how organizations are responding to that. Then I'm going to talk you through some practical examples of what organizations are doing in the digital space with regards to integrated risk and safety management. And then finally, just share some war stories or lessons learned, as well as case studies of what has really worked out there in the industry with regards to digital. Maybe to kick off firstly, I think most of you are aware of our Deloitte as an audit business. In fact, our Deloitte consulting business is probably twice as big as our audit business. In many respects, we've got representation across the globe. In this perspective, I'm demonstrating to use our mining centers of excellence, appropriately based out of South Africa, Canada, and Australia. And what we do in this space really as Deloitte is we partner with clients to walk the digital transformation journey with them, all the way from strategy generation right down to use case implementation, of which you'll see a whole host of partners that we form partnerships with in order to build certain capabilities in our various offerings. One of them being intelligent mining, which has advanced over many years, and I'll share some interesting perspectives on what we've learned there. Okay. So I think really to give you a focus in terms of where the industry is going, I've specifically pulled out mining and metals to focus on today. But really what we've done is, if you look at, we've taken S&P Metals and Mining Index over a couple of years. What you can see is when the times are good, you can see the focus is really on capital investment, expansion, because of the commodity price boom. And then as progress and we had the downturn, we can start seeing that there's again a focus with regards to cost optimization, capital efficiency, etc. And then of late, over the past 10 years, we've really seen a big drive towards digital, and digital as an enabler, not as a pure focus, but rather as an enabler to speed up time to value realization. And that's really been where most organizations have tried to go on. And most, almost to be controversial, most haven't been successful in actually demonstrating the value from digital. And as you can see now, as we head into these uncertain times, where there's really becoming a focus on environmental, social, and governance aspects, understanding the role that companies and organizations have to play in the communities in which they operate, it's really becoming a heated topic. And together with that, using digital tools to really interact with the communities in which you operate. This is really research that we've done on an annual basis and start pulling these trends together in terms of where the market is heading. So this gives you a good focus in terms of really the digital flavor as an accelerator, and then really start understanding what is our social license to operate as organizations in the communities in which we operate. And I think bringing it down to very specifically in terms of COVID-19, where organizations are, we look at it in terms of these three tiers. There's the respond, the recover, and the thrive. And really, this is where most organizations are at this point in time, the respond. It's all about resilience planning, putting together a task force to really understand which areas of the businesses are not agile, and you need to relook at that. And then communication, I guess, more than ever before. Communicating right down to the front line and making sure that your entire workforce is engaged. We often look at these three dimensions around the workforce, and the workplace. And I mean, with all the remote work or work from home policies, this is really where the big disruption is, where the work is being done. And organizations have to relook at the ways in which traditional work is being done. And then obviously getting to a point where you start recovering, making sure your operating model is agile, that the business can respond to these changing times. Because I'm very sure this is probably the first of many, and this just further reinforces why you need to build that resilience into your organization. And obviously going forward is about thriving, using analytics, using data, etc., to be able to form a new way of work. What I'd like to share with you next is some practical examples of how organizations have looked at integration of data across the entire value chain. This is specifically a mining example, but most of you have heard of terms like integrated operations or control towers, etc. This is very much mining view on that end-to-end visibility of the entire value chain, which enables you to start making decisions in an integrated way. You can understand where bottlenecks are in the business. You can start managing those types of risks around supply and demand, making sure that you have sufficient inventory throughout your value chain to supply the market. And we've seen many screens or versions of this, whether it's smart factory or various other industries also looking at the same aspect. It's around integration both downstream and upstream of the value chain. And the whole idea is that this is then an integrated approach to managing your operation. Secondly, we also look at specific use cases like predictive safety. For this one, I want to explain to you what we've done in particular here. So you'll see we've done some work on the IsoMetrix safety management side, where firstly you can understand key safety trends around work that's being executed in specific operations, whether it's maintenance tasks, etc. You're building out things like your bow tie risk assessment analysis. That's one side of it. But then there's a very other powerful side of it where it comes down at looking at the analytics of individuals. So how do you look at behavioral aspects of individuals? And by this, we're looking at things like absenteeism, safety offenses, what's the safety record of the individual, how engaged is this individual, things like your wellness factors. We start putting an index against that. And what we say is when the two converge, you've got a high-risk individual together with a high-risk work environment or work hazard, that's when there's a risk for a safety incident to occur. And that's really how we are utilizing the power of analytics to look at risk and safety management in an integrated way. And then secondly, we also augment that with things like virtual reality training. So as opposed to in the past, you pull out the entire workforce and send them for blanket training on a particular standard operating procedure. In this case, you can actually send out targeted individuals specific training around safety procedures, etc. And you immerse them in that environment so that one understands exactly how to walk step by step through the process, but also the consequences of not complying to specific procedures. Another really cool piece that we're working on in South Africa currently is with the group of mining companies around what we call value beyond compliance. What's really cool here is that in the past, every company has certain spend commitments in the communities in which they operate. And it very much gets done based on the skills that the mining company has, not so much done on what is the actual need from the community perspective. What we've done is we've built some analytics where you start understanding things like sentiment with respect to various topics in the community. How we do that is we link up to social media content, news articles, local municipality data, etc. And then we build an analytics tool that starts looking at positive or negative trends with respect to whether it's housing, education. So now you actually know what individuals are talking about. And if you're having a positive impact with respect to maybe you're building 10 schools in the community, you want to see if you're actually having an impact with respect to what people are talking about. And then secondly, you also monitor and manage the risks in a proactive way on your organization. So in this case, you'll see we again looking at all sorts of statistics around service delivery protests. What was actually the root cause for those? Where are the regions in which those stoppages have occurred, from which you can then start analyzing and interacting or engaging proactively with your community to address them before it actually becomes a real issue. So that sort of looks at from a stakeholder sentiment, risk management, and really around the social license to operate and how mining companies engage outside of their, let's say, outside of their mine gates. Then to share sort of two pieces on lessons learned. I guess what we've seen, we've probably walked this journey for about 4 to 5 years with various clients in different industries around digital. And what we've seen is we've also learned from, being on the ground, implementing digital use cases. At the end of the day, it's not about the technology and the digital use case. It's about how do you wire that back into your business. Firstly, in terms of the people and culture, making sure the organization structure speaks to that, the role definitions, decision making, all of that needs to change when you put in specific digital use cases. Better processes. For me, this is the ultimate game changer. Most organizations have tried to throw in all sorts of technology off the shelf, etc., but nothing else changes in the business. The way in which people do the work, the place in which the work is done, the way in which the organization is structured, all of that doesn't change, which means then you don't get that improvement. What we've seen the biggest is around understanding how do you wire this back into the business. So the rhythms, routines need to change. If you're doing things on paper, they need to move to this digital tool. If you are meeting, 3 times a week to discuss the data, you actually now can meet once a week to discuss how you make decisions, as opposed to arguing around which data or Excel spreadsheet is correct. So that really is where the improvement sits. Finally, a real case study that we've got from the past year of implementing with a couple of our clients. We call it a tale of 2 mining companies, 2 very similar companies in the bulk mining area. You'll see on the left-hand side, we refer to company 1, which really just went along the technology solution implementation. And you'll see various aspects around it. There's no culture change. There was no real sustainability around the solution itself. Project team distinct from the operations team, so not really integrated into that approach. And then on the right-hand side, we've got company 2 that went on the operational transformation. You can just see by the green ticks in terms of what value realization we actually get from this. A lot more sustainable. It actually gets you that step change and improvement. And you'll see the value spans all the way from safety all the way to process innovation, because it's embedded in the way that the business now operates. It's a new way of working. And I guess right at the bottom, it speaks to, you can see that the company on the right reduced their cost by, the unit cost by 20% in the first year, and increased production by the equivalent of 1 new mine, which was approximately 15% additional just in 1 year, which is phenomenal. We've never seen that type of improvement in any organization. And I think that just speaks to making a deliberate effort to understand how digital can change how you do work, wiring that into your business, and making sure there's a concerted effort towards value delivery. I often see in companies, we start out with digital, but then we halfway through forget about why we even started out with it. And secondly, the value side of it has been dissolved at some point. That relentless focus on values is important throughout this journey. Great, that's my side. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass over to Steve, who's going to talk you through some points on safety culture. Thank you.
Good day, everybody, and just to echo the comments and thanks from everybody for taking the time to spend some time with us today. I'm sure all of you have heard about Microsoft, and I'm pretty sure the majority of you use the products that Microsoft has to offer. But I'd like to share some information you might not be aware of and tell you a little bit more about how Microsoft has changed in the last couple of years and what this new focus from Microsoft means for organizations operating in asset-intensive industries. Our mission has remained consistent over the last couple of years, which is to empower every person in every organization on the planet to achieve more. I think this speaks to our passion to empower both the employees and both the people, as well as the lasting institutions that they build. In the industries that we operate in, Microsoft has recognized that not all compute can reside in hyperscale data centers. If you look at safety critical systems, you look at production critical systems, these do and always will remain on site, and there will be a requirement to have those on site. So we've invested a significant amount of money, $5 billion to be honest, in developing our hybrid architecture with the intelligent cloud and the intelligent edge, which gives organizations the ability to have a standardized compute platform across both their cloud environment, their on-prem environment, and potentially their hybrid environment into their own personal data center. Some of our solutions areas, just to quickly touch on those, and I'll touch on the ones I think that are relevant to the conversation that we're having today. Modern work, Anup spoke to the disruption that is with everybody working from home and leveraging platforms like Zoom and Teams to do work. And that presents some challenges, which I'll discuss in a bit. I think the important one is data and AI. And Anup correctly mentioned that a number of even our customers have been on a digital transformation journey and haven't been successful. We do, however, have other customers in the mining space that are delivering in excess of $750 million worth of value annually to their business and digital systems. So there definitely is an opportunity, and there is definitely a value contribution to be had. And some of the things that Anup pointed out at the end of his presentation around management buy-in and around an integrated approach to driving a digital culture are extremely important. Data and AI for us is the currency of the new business going forward. It's the ability to convert data into insights and intelligence into AI, driving competitive advantage. Microsoft's plan is to democratize AI so that every organization can become an AI business. And you don't have to go and get the services of consultants and delivery companies to deliver that for you. We want to enable community development, and we want to enable organizations to drive their own strategies. I'm going to touch on gaming, not because I think it's pretty cool, that too, but also one of the interesting things we're seeing is gamification of in the workplace. So Microsoft has already, through Mimecast, developed a gamification solution for education, and that's proving extremely successful. And I think just watch the space, because gamification in the operations and in business, especially if you look at how that are going to apply to embedding a safety culture, is going to become an interesting opportunity for organizations to leverage going forward. One of the challenges I mentioned with people now working from remote locations, you don't necessarily have the same level of security around the network into your own home. So security is becoming important, and securing the data and securing the information is really where our focus is being. And we are investing millions of dollars every single month in just trying to stay ahead of the criminal element that's out there. All of this is underpinned by Microsoft's culture of growth mindset, of our values, management expectation, and our leadership principles. Just wanted to touch a little bit on what I mentioned is about the new Microsoft. So if you go back 5 years, Microsoft was an organization that sold software products to the IT part of a business. With the investment that we've made in Azure and IoT, as I mentioned, $5 billion, we're now an organization that's selling a platform and a very rich partner ecosystem to a very different part of that business. We are selling to mining, engineering, processing, and we actually have partners that have solutions that deliver services across every single one of the steps in the mine value chain. And again, whilst this is a mining view, the same applies to oil and gas, the same applies to energy, any of those asset-intensive industries. And one of the reasons that our customers like working with us is we don't compete with our partners. So we have an extensive mining community within Microsoft who are connected to our partners in all different parts of the world. And any solution that's delivered is brought into that community for global visibility. And I recently had a customer who's grappling with something he'd been grappling with for 2.5 years. They'd been through numerous POCs, they'd been through numerous pilot projects, and they were actually starting to develop the solution themselves because they just thought there was nobody in the world that had done this. Reached into the mining community, and within 3 days, I had 2 partners which had actually delivered the exact requirement they were looking to deliver. And they're progressing conversations with both of those partners right now. So I think that the takeaway there is, as unique as you think your problem might be, chances are somebody's tried to tackle it, and in which case there's some lessons to be learned, or has tackled and succeeded in that space. So reach out to us, and I'm sure we can help you where you're grappling with some of those challenges. Then on to today's discussion, and literally what we're seeing happen. And again, this is echoing our view, and what we're seeing in the marketplace is echoing a lot of what Anup had just mentioned. So there was a study by the University of British Columbia, which showed some of the challenges around embedding technology and using technology and driving a safety culture. If you think about the workforce in mining, 80% is probably very small as a percentage of the workforce that is mobile. And with that, they have limited access to technology, but they also have limited access to reporting and notifications of when things are happening. So the challenge there is, how do you make a safety mobile? How do you make what you're trying to deliver mobile? And then you want to share results and fix problems very quickly. You want to, again, echoing some of the statements of earlier, you want to develop KPIs that align with the safety culture. If, there's that saying that what excites my boss interests me. And if my KPIs are in a way that drives a safety mindset and a safety culture, it's the best way to embed that. And as long as you've got executive buy-in and take an integrated risk management approach to decision making, you're more than likely going to succeed. An interesting disruption we see going forward, though, is leveraging new technologies to make it simple. If you look at automation of business processes, you look at voice activation, you look at how wearables and location tracking can be used to identify a potential incident or somebody in a stationary position for longer than they should be. You can now start integrating some of the technologies that we're using on a daily basis and driving and maintaining a safety culture. Some of the interesting things I'd just like to talk about very quickly is how some of our technology partners have repurposed their solutions to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the graphics you see down there is an example from one of our partners, a company in Stellenbosch called Stone 3. They initially developed a solution which was for PPE compliance. So they leveraged the existing CCT camera infrastructure and looked for employees not wearing hard hats, not wearing safety vests, not wearing protective glasses, those sorts of PPE requirements. But as the requirements of COVID-19 became evident, they have basically used the same platform and they've adapted it to do things like in the middle, you'll see lack of social distancing. On the right, you'll see examples of people touching their face. It also detects coughing and sneezing. And on the left, you'll see areas of high touch where you might want to do increased sanitation. So all of this is about how do you repurpose the existing technologies that gives you quicker time to market to potentially tackle some of the challenges that the organizations are faced with. So that's just a brief glimpse. I can spend hours talking about what our partners are doing in this space. But with that, I'm going to hand over to Tefo to talk us through an example of what's happening in one of the actual mining companies.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. And again, thank you very much for spending this time with us. Our focus as Debswana when it comes to the digital journey is really focusing on the areas that the two gentlemen have focused on, really looking at analytics and artificial intelligence, software automation, and robotics and physical automation. And this really puts the framework with which we are now addressing a lot of the challenges that we have as a business. So one of the areas that we really focused on is the area around critical controls. So critical control is that control that when all controls fail, but it doesn't, the energy does not reach the person. So for example, if you take your vehicle, you've got your windscreen wipers, you've got your lights, you've got your hooter, you've got your steering wheel. There are many things that must be true in that car to keep you safe. But if your brakes aren't working, if your steering wheel isn't working, you're in real trouble vis-a-vis your hooter or maybe your windscreen wipers. So it's really looking at all of the things that our people need to be managing on a day-to-day basis and saying, but what must be true 24/7 at 100%. It allows our teams to focus and to keep themselves safe in the field. So this was our challenge. How do we ensure that once we've identified those critical controls, we know their condition 24/7 and that condition is at 100%. And what we found is that the majority of these controls require somebody to actually go and check. So it's intermittent, it's at a certain time, it's daily, it's weekly. But what happens 2 seconds after that individual has checked? What happens a minute, an hour, 3 hours before the next check? And that is really the challenge in terms of control and control effectiveness. The second thing we really wanted to focus on was simplicity. And in the middle of the slide here, we've got a couple of photos. The first at the top there is really what the Apollo spaceships used to look like. A typical astronaut would need to remember each and every button, each and every combination to get a certain result out. In the middle is what the shuttles looked like, a much more graphical interface, far less buttons and switches. And this is our 2019 launch of the Dragon 2, a much simpler interface enabling better decision-making by individuals. So one thing we acknowledge is that as technology becomes more prominent in our organizations, the ability to overwhelm individuals is also very, very true. So the two key things, 24/7 critical control management at 100% and simplicity for enhanced decision-making is the challenge that we tried to address as part of this work. So most of you would have seen, if you've ever been to a mining operation, whether it's underground or it's open pit, one of the key things that you'll always see is the mine dumps. This is where the waste is taken, it's dumped in an open area, and these dumps can be anywhere from 50, 100, and sometimes more meters up. So it's a significant height. And when we looked at the mining industry, and these are a key focus area for all mining entities, the potential for a dump truck to come to the edge of that dump, but then unfortunately roll over, is one that has been common and problematic within the mining industry and has been responsible for a significant number of fatalities related to our mining operations. So we chose to focus on this area as an area that we would look at the key critical controls and see how we move from an administrative approach where a foreman goes, does an inspection, somebody puts in a note on paper, and really put a digitalized approach that starts to put us in control of what we want to do. So if you look at this graphic on the screen, this represents a typical mine dump. This here is the berm. So this would be the edge of the dump, 100, 150 meters up. And this berm needs to be 1.5 meters high. So it's sand that's put 1.5 meters high. It allows the driver operator to be able to see the berm and to judge their distance to the berm. The key critical control there is this yellow part, which is called the safety zone. You do not pass the safety zone. You do not touch the berm as part of your reversing. The berm is not a hard engineering control, which means if you do touch that berm, there's a potential for the truck to go beyond that berm and then obviously roll down that distance, which can cause serious injuries and in the mining industry has caused fatalities. So the scenario would be that if you can see my cursor, the truck would come in, it would go clockwise, it would then do the reverse, dump, and then reverse, and then go forward out. The second thing that we have is we have a dozer. A dozer effectively is in charge of making sure that any defect to the dump is regularly, rapidly corrected so that we don't have a height that is below that 1.5 meters. So this is the system. This is how it operates on a day-to-day basis, but we have now applied an AI and data analytics package to this to solve that administrative process. And I'd like to show you a very quick video. So what we did is that we effectively taught the AI first to recognize the back of the dump truck or the bowl. We then taught it to recognize the tire. This here in the white is the actual berm. And what you have here is the distance of the truck to the berm. At the top left, it indicates the berm height, and it also indicates the berm proximity, which is 2.5 meters. So in this simulation, effectively, as the truck reverses, you'll see that that berm proximity gets less and less. And as it goes over that 1.5 meters, it goes red. That's how the AI has been built. How we have now harnessed that information is that the driver operator would see exactly what you have seen on your screen. They would be able to, and this is very important for transparency and feedback. So there's a full 360 feedback where the driver operator sees the exact incident. They're able to comment, give updates. Was it correct? How did they see it? What could be done to improve that situation going forward? What we are now also doing is integrating this into what we call a critical control integrator. This is to ensure that we don't have multiple critical controls that become even more difficult to manage. So we're starting to take legacy critical controls, such as our slope stability radar, and we're putting it into the same integrator that we're now presenting the berm analytics into. And you can see that on the left here. So this is what a dispatch operator would see. They basically see any infractions where the truck touched the berm. And this is the view of the camera that would show them the berm height. And in that, they'd be able to see whether there's compliance by the dozer operator to manage that berm height. This is the overall, one of the overall dashboards, again, that they'd be able to see things like the compliance to the dump monitoring, how many good dumps, how many went over, the reverse speed, how quickly the driver, the dozer operator responded to correcting the berm heights. And then just as, if not more importantly, from a culture perspective and a change perspective, what was the intervention? How effective was the intervention by the supervisor? Was it the face-to-face engagements, the training, other processes, and then being able to track that at an organizational shift or individual basis? So this is the approach that we are using to look at critical controls 24/7 at 100%. And this is the process we'll then be following to then start systematically adding other critical controls around issues such as transportation, dam wall failure, fire, and isolation within our organization. Thank you very much.
Probably best if you answered this one, Tefo. What technology are you using in terms of those dashboards that you used? And who is actually looking at those dashboards with all the colors and blocks?
All right, good, thanks. So we're working with Microsoft for building both the AI and the critical control dashboard. We're working on a Azure platform. And the way we are approaching it is that there's a huge amount of information. And we're looking to really tailor the information to the requirement. So if you looked at what the operator sees, all the operator will see will be either the compliance or the non-compliance. The supervisor would have a more larger view in terms of a certain version of that dashboard, but then the pit supervisor, or should I say the dispatch supervisor, the individual who's managing that overall operation, would be able to see all of that information. So the principle is really the right fit information for the level of individual, and then using the analytics to get that right information to the right teams. Thank you, John.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Just another question for you, Tefo. I think probably best for you to answer it. What is Debswana considering in terms of the use of autonomous vehicles? And in that particular use case that you mentioned, could you maybe discuss any considerations as to how you might address some of those critical controls via things like autonomous vehicles?
A very good question. So the approach we're using on this is that we are building using an administrative control. So even with the AI as it currently is being tested and implemented, it will still be an administrative control. The ambition is that engaging through our partners that provide our dump trucks, we will move that administrative control to an engineered hard control, i.e. when the AI sends the signal that there is non-compliance, it automatically takes over the vehicle, whether there's a person or there's not. We are looking at autonomous dumping and other autonomous operations within our processing plants and within our operations. That forms part of the project work that we're doing as part of the expansion processes for our operations going forward. So the more autonomous, the easier it will become. And we just have to manage that transition as we move into that direction. Thank you, John.
Excellent. So I'm going to sort of paraphrase a combination of questions that have come in and maybe phrase it in my own way. And I think it's probably, you know, any one of you or all of you could address this. So you all in some way, shape or form mentioned bringing technology down to the individual level, but also, you know, having technology, really acting in the background in terms of, to your case, Tefo, you don't want to rely on that individual. So from a change management perspective, can you all give some advice in terms of how an organization can manage that change in terms of digital transformation and safety culture and bringing that down to the individual level?
Yes, I think what one would want to do when addressing change management, I think too often we try the approach of off-the-shelf, plug and play, install, and things supposed to happen on its own. I think there needs to be a concerted effort towards recognizing the change that this has on individuals, on the way that work is being performed and how that is impacted using digital. You can't keep doing things the way you used to do. If you're trying to improve something needs to change. What we've seen, and I think what works best with respect to change management, is you develop a specific solution with the guy at the front line, because he's the guy who knows best, firstly. He understands what problem he's trying to solve for, and the tool is to enable him to do his work better, faster, whatever it may be. And when you do that, I want to almost say 50% of the change management is done. So that's kind of the route you want to do, and then obviously I guess communication. But it's always work with the guy at the front line. It takes care of half of the things with respect to training, etc. There's a proper communication plan in place. Steve?
Yeah, I'd absolutely like to echo that. And I think one of the comments you made earlier was that it's got to start at the top. If you don't have executive buy-in, and it's something everybody says, but it's a lot more difficult to actually get done than it is on paper than what it looks like by just saying it. But you've got to get executive buy-in. And somebody once asked me, how do you make technology stick in an organization? And I didn't have an answer, but somebody in the audience actually said, if you build technology in a way that your business can't function without it, it'll stick. And if you think about how you want to embed safety culture in an organization, you want that to be something that's experienced and lived from the coalface all the way to the boardroom. If you are implementing technology in a way that your business can't function effectively without it, that technology will absolutely stick, and it'll stay around forever.
Yeah, I think from my side, John, I couldn't agree more. And that's one of the reasons we really went on this journey with the teams. It was around the customer being the dump truck operator. And this build has been built by the teams. So it's been built by the operator. It's been built by the shift coordinator. It's been built by the foreman. It's been built by the mining manager. So when we present this to our excos and our boards, it's actually that team that does that presentation. They tell it as the owners of this process. And I think that enhances your change process significantly.
That's excellent, gentlemen. Thank you for sharing that answer. And I think that it does really address maybe a common theme in the mining industry is that there's oftentimes concern about digitizing mining and the potential negative impacts on people who are the lifeblood of a mining operation and the lifeblood of a business. But I think you all echoed very clearly there that people are absolutely at the root of this and are what you need to be able to drive and implement these types of solutions. So thank you very much. Safe and healthy day.